All right, so this is Chapter 8, Lifting and Moving Patients. This is still part of the EMS Operations National EMS Education Competencies Introduction. Obviously, as part of our job, we're going to have to move patients from point A to point B. The problem with that is trying to move patients out of interesting situations without hurting yourself. I guarantee you, once you get a even mild back injury, it is something that will continue to be aggravated time and time and time again. So you need to take care of yourself. There's no point in starting with back injuries early on in your career because they are career ending after a while. So you really need to learn how to move your body and how to lift properly so that you don't hurt yourself. At a minimum, you will be putting the patient on a wheeled stretcher, also known as a cot. I also call it a gurney. That's definitely not as common now, but bottom line, you will have to move them at least onto your cot and into the back of the ambulance so that you can go ahead and transfer them to the hospital. Even if they climb in the back of the ambulance by themselves, you're still going to have to get your cot out and into the hospital. So you will use these. The average cot weighs between 40 and 145 pounds. Now I know that's quite the range. It depends on what you got on it. The heavier ones tend to be those power cots that everybody has nowadays, and they seem like such a great idea, but you still have to get it in and out of places. Generally, what we do now, instead of taking the cot into the house because it is so heavy, we find other ways to get the ambulance out, and we'll talk about some of those, to get the person out, be it ambulating or some of these other methods that we'll go into in this chapter, and then just take the cot from their front steps to the ambulance so we're not having to drag that around. The lighter ones, the 40-pound ones, have nothing on them. There's really no fancy features whatsoever. What they're meant to do is, obviously they're wheeled, and so they are going to help transport the patient on hopefully relatively flat surfaces from the house, the whatever, to the ambulance. This really helps us not have to carry that patient. There's a couple of other options, but most of them requires more heavy lifting. Before you ever go on a call, you should make sure that you know how to use it. The older style ones, they were metal, they were silver, and they had a very thin mattress that was covered in a waterproof material, and it basically went up or down, and then you could move the head up or down. And the newer ones tend to have different colored handles depending on what it does. So our cots in particular, they're black and yellow for the most part. And then anything that is red is movable. So in order to bring it up and down, there's red handles that you squeeze. In order to raise and lower the head, there's red handles. The foot brakes on all of the wheels are red as well, so that you know where it's going to move. That doesn't necessarily mean that your ambulance cots are going to look like that, so make sure you know how to use them. You definitely don't want to be on a call and squeeze the wrong handle and drop your patient the 2 feet that it elevates. That just wouldn't be great. Or having a patient on there and not knowing how to drop the wheels. So for the general features of our cots, there's a head end and there's a foot end, and they are not interchangeable. So make sure that you know how to put your patient on there. On a backboard, really not a big deal. But when you have a patient that's already in pain, etc., and they have to move themselves and you have to flip them around, that sucks, man. So just be careful. The hinges at the center of the cot allow to raise the head up and down. Make sure that you place the hips right there at that point where it's going to bend so that your patient is bending in the correct place. There's guardrails on either side, little handrails that need to be elevated when you have a patient on there so that they don't roll one side to the other. Typically, there's some sort of undercarriage that allows for not storage, but area for you to be able to raise and lower the cot. Most ambulance cots have a pretty standard height. It's anywhere between 32 to 36 inches total. And that depends on the model. So that's honestly just a generality. When it's in the ambulance, the lowest that it goes is 12 inches above the ground. There's a mattress on there that is not comfortable by any means. I have taken many a nap in the back of an ambulance, but it's covered with some sort of fluid resistant material. And then you have straps, minimum of 2. We typically have at least 3 straps. And then we have what we call speed straps that go up over top of the shoulders. That way, if you have a patient that's laying flat and you hit the brakes, they don't end up sliding forward up off of the cot. Come on, there we go. Backboards are predominantly made of plastic nowadays so that we can take them directly into the CT, the MRI machine. We don't have to move our patients off of them now. They used to be made of wood. Most of the ones that I had in the military were still the wooden ones. You can't x-ray through them, and they are quite heavy and hard to clean. So these are definitely better. They're about 6 to 7 feet long. And we typically use these if we have to move the patient out of a pretty awkward situation, anywhere that has lots of really tight corners that you can't get a cot into, that it would be really hard to get a stair chair into. You could use a backboard because once you attach the patient securely to it, you can actually stand them up and pivot them around corners if you need to. There are those holes along the side, and you see the little silver I don't even know what you call them, rods. In all of those holes, those are to attach the straps to, and there's several of them so that you can move depending on where you need to put them to secure your patient appropriately. We either use the buckled straps or we'll use what's called spider straps, and it's kind of webbing. A lot of people don't use the spider straps anymore. Mostly what we'll use for your class lab days is the buckles. These plastic boards definitely are not porous, meaning that they don't absorb material, so they're a lot easier to clean. You need a minimum of 2 people to adequately move a backboard around. If at all possible, you can put more people, but you have to have a balanced number. You can't have 2 people on one side and 1 on the other because it's a lot harder to coordinate movement and you might end up jostling your patient one side or the other. When moving and positioning patients, you need to make sure that you move as a team. You want to try to prevent an injury to you, your teammate, to the patient themselves. So it takes a lot of coordination in moving a patient the proper way. You should be practicing how to move a patient. You should be communicating with your partners on a scene of the safest way. Nobody's going to do this alone. Even on little tiny people, you can hurt yourself just by turning the wrong way. And it is very, very common. This is the number one reason that people get out of the field is because of an injury. You have to maintain physical fitness, and I know that you'll be looking around at some of the ambulances running around town and go, yeah, that one's not maintaining physical fitness. But that will greatly reduce your chance of injury. When you look at me, I mean, I don't look particularly strong, and I've had to lift some pretty heavy people. That's actually not how I obtained my back injury, but if you learn proper mechanics and how your body works, you actually can lift some pretty crazy things without realizing how truly heavy they are. We'll go into some body mechanics uh, anatomy review here. So you have your shoulder girdles. It rests up here on the top. Then you have your spinal column, your pelvis, and then your legs. There are specific ways that you should position your body in order to lift properly. Those are called body mechanics. That's the relationship between the body's anatomic structures and the physical forces associated with lifting and moving. So your lifting position, your shoulders should be aligned over your pelvis. Your hands should be held close to your legs. So we don't want to use our arms as a predominant force. That's more just so you can grasp. Your force is essentially going to go straight up and down the spinal column. You're not really going to put any strain on any one place in particular. Lifting technique, this is how you lift, okay? So you're keeping your shoulders kind of locked out. Your legs should be about 15 inches apart. Make sure that you have your feet positioned so that you have a good center of gravity. You're going to grasp the patient's stretcher and kind of adjust the location of your feet to make sure that they are just on the outside of the stretcher, because you're going to be bringing it down in between your knees. It's always an underhand grasp because then you're using biceps rather than triceps. Biceps are the larger muscle group. You're going to keep your back relatively straight. I would say that he is not doing a great job of that, but the fact that he's got the weight into his body, chances are he's not going to hurt himself. You should be keeping your butt down. We're not bending over, we're stooping down. You may injure your back if you lift while leaning forward. If you don't keep your butt down and stoop down and use your knees, you're going to be putting most of the strain on your back instead of your legs. So, incorrect way to lift, right here. We do not ever bend over like that, or we're not supposed to. I wouldn't say that we don't, but we should not be bending over like this. This is a back injury, and severe at that, back injury waiting to happen. You want to lift the patient straight up when you lift. Keep the weight close to your body. Keep your arms the same distance apart. Keep your feet the same distance apart. Your power grip is your palms up, hands about 10 inches apart, all fingers at the same angle. So you're going to fully support that handle on the curved palm so that you have a good grip on whatever it is that you're lifting. You don't want there to be any chance that your patient is going to slip from your grasp. So make sure that you have all of your fingers curled over so that you've got a really good hold of them. And the closer you keep them to your body, the easier it is it's going to be to lift them without causing any sort of injury. In order to put them down, you just reverse the steps. But you're still going to be in relatively the same body position. And we will continue on in the next video.